seconded that the agenda be approved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The closed session meeting, Mr. Day will take that item.
The board met in closed session this morning with its real property negotiators and with legal counsel with regard to acquisition of easements affecting 2 parcels in the Rivers EIP area, and no action was taken.
Public comment on matters not on the agenda. I have 3 cards. Kim McDonald.
Property. You could come in and dig wherever, how deep, whatever you want. I would like the it more limited. My big hassle is the fact that my house is built on a pad. The person who built the pad is not me. He's long since gone, and I do not know what he used to make that pad. So if you guys come in and find potentially hazardous materials, which even asphalt has been cited as being in the past, you guys got me over another barrel, because now my land value is down because it has hazardous waste. Like I say, I cannot sign this. I don't want you on my property doing this as it stands, as it is written now. That's the main thing. So that's what I'm talking about today. Thank you.
You will look into that, will you please?
Yes, we will.
Thank you. And item number 2, Victoria Yogiyama.
Thank you very much, President Denton and members of the board, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of our Yokoyama farm at 3000 South River Road. And first of all, I'd like to thank you for responding to my last letter at the last board meeting of August 6th regarding my concerns about it was on August 9th, of several concerns that I had about the flood agency's ability to enter the property, and then also to condemn and to confiscate different aspects of our land, including roadways and of course, the setback levy and the use of our topsoil. So I appreciate a formal written response that I could also convey to my family members. Now, just to recap of why I'm so concerned about our farm is because we have a long history of farming in Sacramento. My grandparents immigrated to California and the Pocket Road area in the early 1900s to begin farming there. And after the war, my parents ended up in West Sacramento farming on the area which is the northern part of Segment F. And since then their dream home and their property was purchased at 3000 South River Road, and this is the subject of many West Sacramento actions. The worst is, of course, the building of the setback levee. I have been asking for a cutoff wall, and I see by your letter that there may be a possibility of mitigation of this, the setback levee versus the cutoff wall by introduction of, in consideration of a hybrid combination of a shallow cutoff wall as well as a seepage berm. However, in the letter, one of the things that I did notice is that there seems to be a contradiction of the first paragraph on page 3 versus the first paragraph on page 1, and I wanted to be sure at this meeting that indeed that there will be a possibility of reconsideration of a hybrid cutoff wall, which would be shallower than a deep cutoff wall that we had originally requested. and asked for reconsideration, and also a seepage berm, which would obviously minimize the footprint on our property. So I wanted to be sure that this is this is a possibility, not that just you were looking at the alternate plan and the alternate plan that was originally proposed when the public was first presented with the levee project. Then, finally, regarding, Kim just presented the fact that we received those letters about the environmental study, and I also received one for our property. If you could reconsider Kim's request, then you need to reconsider ours, because we're currently farming that property. So it would be best that we don't have anyone entering and disrupting the crops that are currently on that property, which probably will be harvested by the end of next month. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Karen Diepenbrock, please. No problem. The approval of the August the 9th minutes. Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the ayes have it. Review of our monthly year-to-date revenue and expense.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This cash flow report summarizes receipts and expenditures for the month of July 2012, which is the beginning of fiscal year 2012-13. July is typically a low volume month, and that's reflected in the transactions report. And that's due to the closing of the prior year's fiscal books. And we encourage contractors and vendors to get their invoices in early. So typically July will be a low volume month, and that's how it ran pretty well. There were no significant receivables, and expenditures totaled about $73,000 for the ending position of about $11 million. The books still haven't closed for fiscal year 2012. And when they do, the adjusting entries may change the starting number for this year, and there may be some other adjustments related to accruals, and I'll report back on those once the books have closed. And that summarizes the report for this month.
Questions?
Thank you very much. Item number 5. Karen, would you like to speak on item number 5, you say?
Chairman Denton, perhaps we should present the item first, and
Well,
then
we
the
can-
chairman can open up public comment after staff and remarks. Thank you.
Will be done.
Chairman Denton and the board, thank you very much for having this item returned to the board. This represents a continuation of a conversation that began last February when the board gave direction to the project team to proceed with environmental studies on the basis of the alternative 2 alignments. There were two alternative design configurations that were developed through the 15% design process. And the board, again, in February, gave direction, identified the alternative 2 configuration as the preferred project for evaluation in the environmental documents. At that time, the board also gave direction to the design team to proceed with 65% design for all of the components of the Southport Early Implementation Project other than those 2 subsections that were called Segment F and Segment B. The board asked for a series of subsequent investigations in Segment F. The direction was to revisit the financial and other project administrative issues to confirm the board's preference for alternative alternative 2 versus alternative 1, and in May, in May, we came back to the board. The board considered the further investigation and confirmed that in segment F, the alternative 2 alignment was the board's preferred approach. Since that time, we've also returned to the board with interim products from the segment B value engineering analysis. The board's direction in February was for the team to investigate every reasonable, technically feasible approach that could result in a reduced land requirement to implement the alternative 2 levy scenario. And we're here to say that those investigations have been completed. The staff report before the board and the public contains the final conclusions. It'll take us another month or so to package the work up into a formal report and bring that back to the board and publish it for the public. But we're here today with the final results, and we'll be providing a summary of those results. Before I turn the presentation over to Derek Larson, the project team manager, I'd like to just remind the board and those in attendance and watching about the overall context of this project. The objective of the Southport Early Implementation Project is to deliver 5.7 miles of levee improvements that will bring the right bank levee system into full compliance with state and federal regulations and achieve compliance with the latest state directives in providing 200-year level of flood protection. That's our number one objective for this project. Along the way, the board has made very clear, and staff has taken its direction very seriously, to do whatever we can to reduce effects, reduce impacts and imposition on private properties. We recognize that there's an unavoidable impact, and we've taken all measures that we can, again, under board direction, to reduce the adverse effects of the project on private properties. The objective in achieving these outcomes has been to investigate different scientific approaches, different regulatory approaches, trying to resolve, again, the methods of analysis that lead to a design that will shrink the physical aspect of the project. And along the way, again, result in a less imposition on private properties, but also to drive the costs of project delivery down. WSAFCA, as a local entity, has a fixed capacity for funding these improvements. We're chasing every opportunity we can to bring as much other monies to the table so that we can, in fact, deliver the entire project that the board has told us is needed in Southport. So with that as a overall context, what I'd like to do is introduce Derek Larson to the podium. Derek's going to present the results of the Segment B value engineering study and present the resulting recommendations to the board for continuing with 65% design in Segment B.
Good morning, Chairman Denton, board members. Again, Derek Larson with MBK Engineers, and I'll be going through and presenting you with the results of the value engineering study. So just to let you know how we're going to move through this presentation, first we're going to provide just a little bit of background. We're going to talk about the under seepage mitigation measures which the design team evaluated in the course of the value engineering study. We're going to talk a little bit about the public outreach and property owner meetings that occurred through this process. We're going to look at the alternative 2 alignments, both the one that we had previously provided to you that was the low cost preferred alternative, in addition to the alignment that we, alignment 2 with the revised under seepage mitigation measures, which reduced impacts to adjacent property owners, and also turns out to be a little bit less expensive as well, so a double win, if you will. We'll go through the investment analysis, looking at both alternative 1 and alternative 2, the potential impacts to homes for both the alternative 1 and alternative 2, a summary of results, and then just a look forward on the project schedule, and then we'll finish with a staff recommendation that will be presented by Dave. So again, in February 2012, you approved the task order 4 for 65% design, excluding REACH's FMB. In March 2012, the board identified a EIS-EIR preferred alternative for the entire project. In May 2012, we identified segment F alignment that would be carried forward in the 65% design, which is consistent with what's in the EIS-EIR. In June 2012, the segment B value engineering briefing was presented. And in August, we presented the segment B value engineering update to give you a sense of where we were and the progress we had made. One of the things that we know is very important to the board, and one of the main reasons for advancing the REACH B value engineering study was really to give you a better understanding of the potential impacts, both to adjacent property and also the cost of the project to WSAFCA, the investment required. And in keeping with that, on August 31st, 2012, we took the results from the value engineering study, and we had a meeting with our geotechnical experts from the Board of Senior Consultants, our agency partners at the Central Valley Flood Protection Board, the Department of Water Resources, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. We provided them an opportunity to give us feedback on the results of our under seepage analysis, and I'm happy to report that it was a very good meeting. It appears that on first look at what we've done, they are approve the approach we've taken. They haven't approved it officially, but they approve of the approach that we've taken, that we've laid out. They will have to evaluate it. It'll go through further review through the agencies. But what it really did was give us a little bit more confidence that what we're bringing forward to you will be a lot like what the project looks like at the end when it's finally constructed. So again, we're trying to minimize uncertainty to the board in making a decision, and we made a lot of progress with that meeting. Today I'm going to present the Segment B value engineering results. As Dave alluded to, the report itself will be about a month off as we have to compile the report. It has to go through QC and whatnot with the engineering team. So for property owner outreach, we've really worked hard to reach out to the property owners. We understand this project has an impact to the community, both those directly affected and those who will be protected at the end of the project. August 2011, we had an initial meeting with Segment B property owners. In December 2011, we had a final preliminary design analysis results meeting with the public. In January 2012, we presented the 15% design results to the public. In July 2012, we had a Segment B preliminary VE study results meeting with affected property owners and the public. In August 2012, we had meetings with affected property owners, and in September 2012, we had meetings with affected property owners, keeping them abreast of where we were and the progress we're making, and also getting feedback from the property owners as well as to their preferences for the project. So for the VE study, the approximate cost of the VE study has been about $200,000 to advance the design. That includes additional borings that were performed, geotechnical analysis, coordination, and completion of the report. We looked at about 20 scenario studies where we evaluated different under seepage mitigation measures. We looked at relocation of utility corridors so we could avoid impacts to homes. We were looking at the location of where South River Road, and I'll just say in general, we're still looking at how we'll access some of the properties. So the transportation network aspect is something that we'll continue to look at to try to minimize impacts to property owners. For under seepage mitigation, we looked at conventional slurry cutoff walls. We looked at varied widths of the berms. We looked at shallow slurry cutoff walls with varied seepage berm widths. The inclusion of the cutoff wall allows us to sometimes reduce the berm, and you'll see that as a result of the VE study as we move forward with the presentation. We looked at conventional slurry cutoff walls with a clamshell excavator, which is a little more cost-effective approach to put in a deep wall than the TRD and CSM, but it doesn't quite reach necessarily as far always as TRD CSM, and has a higher degree of uncertainty as to the alignment. So it's something that we looked at using in the study. We also looked at relief wells. I will say that relief wells are a bit more of a difficult issue in that our agency partners are not particularly, don't view them favorably because of the maintenance requirement. In addition to that, when the water comes through, you actually have to do something with that water and transport it somewhere and deal with it. That can be a problem as well. And it doesn't always result in a reduced footprint just because you're using relief wells because of all the other issues associated with dealing with the water. And I know that from an operation and maintenance standpoint, that it's not viewed favorably by many reclamation districts. RD 900, I believe, would fall into the camp as one of those reclamation districts. Okay. So I'm presenting alternative 2 with the 250-foot berm just to set the stage of where we were previously. This is essentially what we presented to you as the low-cost solution previously for alternative 2, but also carried with it the highest impact to adjacent property owners. We also had a wall solution that we presented to you that had the minimum impacts but would have required a significantly additional investment by WSAFCA to implement. So now I want to go to where we have landed at the end of the VE study for alternative 2. So you can just see here, this is the currently proposed alignment, which we are making a recommendation to the board today, staff recommendation, to approve alternative 2 based on the work that we've done through the value engineering study. So I want to point out a few things with respect to this. Through the process of the VE study, we invested additional money and essentially what I would say is advanced the design. We're always looking for ways to minimize the project footprint and the cost of the project. So really what the VE study didn't reach be is it advanced the design. We're always looking for these types of solutions. This, again, provides the board with a higher degree of certainty of the impacts associated with the project. I do want to point out that while we did meet with the Board of Senior Consultants and our agency partners, we still have to go through that review process and it will require approval by those agencies. So while what we present before you today is what we believe is possible and likely, just understand that we're not the only decision makers. We have to make sure that both the Central Valley Flood Protection Board and the Corps of Engineers and DWR agree with our analysis. So in this scenario, we were able to reduce the berm from 250 feet down to about 70 to 80 feet with the inclusion of a shallow cutoff wall. So the inclusion of the shallow cutoff wall combined with additional information which we obtained through the VE study allowed the design team to reduce the total size of the berm and really greatly reduce the impacts to the adjacent property owners. You can see in green that we have a utility corridor that is going around one of the potentially affected parcels with a home on it. That's just really at this point we're just demonstrating that we can work with the utility companies to make sure we don't impact the home. The final alignment of both the utility corridor and some of the transportation issues with respect to how we're going to access the properties will be handled between the 65% design, the 90% design. In all likelihood, we'll have answers to those questions in advance of actual publishing the 90% design, which we'll continue to share with the property owners. We'll continue to secure feedback from the affected property owners who have access and work closely with them to make sure we're doing everything we can to minimize the impacts to the property owners. So moving on, well, first let me ask this. Are there any questions with respect to the alignment from the board before I move on to show the investment analysis portion of the presentation? No? Okay. Okay, great. So when looking at the WSAFCA investment, what you see before you are two tables. The first table deals with the alternative 1 alignment. First table deals with the alternative 1 alignment. Scenarios 1 and 2 for the alternative 1, S1 and S2, were the scenarios we previously presented to the board that outline the bracket the impacts both financially and impacts to private property owners. Scenario 3 is based on our value engineering study and a reduction in the berm width. So you can see that scenario 3 with alternative 1 alignment the estimated displacement of homes would be about 9 homes. It would cost about $2.8 million more for WSAFCA to construct this project than the alternative 2 project, the alternative 2 alignment. So moving into the alternative 2 table, S4 and S5 again are just bracketing the impacts. It's the analysis that we have provided you previously. S6 was put together based on feedback from the property owners and the board, where we were asked to look at what it would cost to put a deep wall into Station 65 to reduce impacts to some of the adjacent property owners, instead of looking at a deep wall throughout the entire reach. That would require an additional investment by WSAFCA of about $7.5 million over S7, which is the alternative that you just looked at, that is the staff recommended alternative. That alternative is estimated to displace approximately 10 homes, and again is the preferred alternative and the recommended alternative from the staff to the board for your consideration. So before I jump ahead, I just want to again ask, are there questions with respect to these tables? No? Okay.
No, I don't think so.
No. I apologize. It appears that I got 2 slide changes here. So these tables represent the estimated cost from the VE study of each of the alternatives I described earlier, in conjunction with the WSAFCA share that would be required to implement them. And as you can see, S7 at $13.1 million for WSAFCA investment required to complete the project, again, is the staff recommendation. Let me make sure I didn't skip anything here with the screen cutting out. It's getting a little confusing. Okay. So here are the summary of results, and we're going to talk about why the staff believes selection alternative 2 versus alternative 1 is being recommended to the board with a shallow cutoff wall and a limited berm. It reduces the WSAFCA investment by approximately $2.8 million over alternative 1. If that money were leveraged, if $2.8 million were available for leveraging with the state under EIP, you would be able to construct about $9.8 million, or about $10 million worth of additional project with the state. If federal funding is secured and you leverage it with the state and the federal government, you'd be able to construct approximately $26.2 million worth of project with that $2.8 million. So again, we're working hard to try to be wise with WSAFCA's investment in these funds, because we want to continue to advance risk reduction and provide a 200 level year protection for the entire community, for this protecting the entire city of West Sacramento. Alternative 2 requires the potential displacement of 1 additional home, and it does not reduce the estimated Reach B state cost share, which is 65% for alternative 2. It increases flood risk reduction for the entire Southport region and maximizes the flood control improvements with the limited local dollars. So given that we secure a decision from the board today on the alignment for Reach B, the schedule for completing 65% design is in December 2012. And then the initiation of public review of the draft EIR-EIS is in February 2013. And we believe we'll be able to initiate construction in essentially August 2014. It's important that we make a decision as soon as possible. The team has worked very hard to try to get us in a position to present you with the information you need to make a decision. Initiation of construction in 2014, we believe, will be critical to continue to advance not only the improvements in Southport, but also looking forward and potentially advancing additional improvements around the basin. So with that, I would like to turn the presentation over to Dave to provide the final staff recommendations.
Thank you, Derek. Project team is asking the board to reaffirm a decision that it made in February when the board identified the alternative to design alignment, the 15% design alignment, as the preferred approach for the entire Southport EIP. In light of today's additional information, staff and the consultant team feel very confident that we've identified a route ahead that will achieve the board's directive of minimizing impacts upon private property in segment B, while at the same time continuing to advance the directives to be wise stewards with the limited local funding capacity of the agency, and achieve the overall project, a 5.7-mile flood risk reduction project for the Southport area and for the entire city. The form that recommendation takes is, again, to identify alternative 2 alignment as the preferred design approach for levee segment B, and to direct the team to proceed with 65% design accordingly. There are a number of things, as Derek mentioned, that would be a part of that continuing work effort, including additional conversations with property owners in the segment B area to figure out how to achieve local access. South River Road will no longer, under this scenario, will no longer be on top of the levee, and we have still ahead of us really how to figure out that problem, how to make sure that people have access to their properties and their homes, and that will be an ongoing collaboration between the property owners and the property and the project team. We'll continue to do that while at the same time meeting the needs for safety access, public safety access, and again, continuing to minimize where we can impacts to private property. So that concludes our recommendations, concludes our presentation, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the board if there are any at this point.
Yeah, Dave, we're not at 65% yet.
No, we are not.
We're getting close. And if there are any other scenarios that come up, we will share them with the property owners, and you'll share that information with the board, because I mean, if there is a way to shrink it even further, then that would be something that's good, that's worthwhile.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I think Bill just hit it on the head. I think we have to really continue to strive to reduce that footprint as much as possible. All those in favor?
No,
Excuse me, Chairman.
People want to speak.
Chairman, you have a member of the public that would like to.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah. Karen?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'm here today to express great appreciation for the efforts that you have made and that your staff has made. We really think that your staff has been very responsive under the leadership of Michael Bissett and now Dave Spock and the whole MBK team and the city engineering staff. I really feel that everyone has done their best and continues to do their best to protect the homes and to further the flood control project for the benefit of all. And I want to express my appreciation. We've had a number of comments at various hearings, not always complimentary, and I just want to say thank you. We felt that everyone has really tried, and that it's been a really good example of how private citizens and government can cooperate together. And we appreciate what Mr. Kristoff and our chairman, Mr. Denton, said today about continuing to look for ways to save even more land and even protect more. We hope that that can be done, because that would be, extremely beneficial to the citizens. And so I wanted to express that publicly and say that I think West Sacramento is a truly terrific city. And that's what I say to my friends. I've been very impressed with the whole way you do things and approach things in this community. It's greatly to all of your credit. And then I do have one just small ask here. In the motion that you're making, because we've had so many alternatives and so many variations in scenarios, could I ask for just a bit more specificity? Right now, the motion that you have before you in your staff report where it says recommended action in number 1, and this is in the VE engineering study report, it says identify alternative 2 alignment. And that alternative 2 alignment means a lot of different things. And if we could say alternative 2 alignment scenario 7, and perhaps shallow cutoff wall and limited berm, then I think we would have the specificity, so someone looking at this later on would have there'd be no confusion.
It is, yeah.
So I'd very much appreciate your doing that, and thank you for your attention, thank you for your time, and we hope that this moves forward with great success for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you for your kind remarks. Kim McDonald.
A couple months ago, I had a meeting with Mr. Panos and Mr. Bismack about how they were figuring the cost of the cutoff wall in area, Section B, and I requested some information as far as the cutoff wall being put in Section A and the costs there if they did the same thing in our section, Section B, only having to go deeper. And I requested where I could go to research the information, and it was never responded to me. So my biggest thing with this has always been the fact that the money is what's making this project work. And I understand you're on a budget, you have to make the budget work. But it keeps on coming back to this matching money from the government for making this happen. And I don't understand how the cutoff wall can be put in a different section and not our section. Has been proven to be engineerily feasible, but what's stopping everything is the cost, and it's because you will not get the matching funds. And so it comes to a magic show type thing on the board where you're trying to do the mathematics, where essentially there should be a figure somewhere that says not putting in the cutoff wall will cost us this much more, not because it's coming out of our pocket, but because we're not getting matching funds. The matching funds is a very difficult thing to follow. And if you're just shooting to take land, to do it in the way that's going to get you most matching funds instead of most safety, I can't see how it's morally right to do it just for the money when it can be done in a way that leaves the levee that's in place, in footprint, where there's homes. Not just in my place, but in Yokoyama's too. Thank you.
I think,
Would you like me to respond to
would you please?
Yes, I'm happy to. With respect to Ms. McDonald's comment, the value engineering study does include an analysis of a deep well. Those costs will be reported in the overall document that we expect will be published next month. The results will also show the net cost to WSAFCA. It's not so much with respect to cost share, but the net impact on WSAFCA's financial capacity. Yes, there's always a cost share consequence because the state will only share in the cost of the least cost adequate solution, but the VE study will present the net cost to WSAFCA of that scenario. With respect to Ms. Diepenbrock's recommendation, yes, we can certainly accommodate that suggestion. If you like, I can offer the board recommended language at this time. Or would you like to
Sure, yeah,
Okay.
no, just see what you have to say.
give it a whirl? And
We may not like it, but let me see what you have to say.
You know, I don't expect that you're going to like it that much, but maybe it'll get you going in the right direction. So an alternative language for recommended action number 1 would be to identify alternative 2 alignment as to the preferred design alternative for levee segment B of the Sacramento River Southport EIP. And then what we would do is look at item number 3 for the amplification, where it says, direct the project team to integrate the preferred design alternative 2 alignment for levee segment B, implementing the methodology reflected in scenario number 7, including the use of a shallow cutoff wall and reduced berm in the 65% design package for the Sacramento River Southport EIP.
Pretty good. Okay.
You going to keep me around, or
No,
should I try that again?
We're going to, I think we're going to accept that.
All right, good. Thank you.
Yeah, all three of us agree, we're going to accept that.
It's a good day for me.
And,
Well, I think you better make a formal motion now. I mean, this is a very, very, very important issue. And so I think we need to truly sit down and we'll stumble and bumble along with probably the wordage and everything, but at the same time, I think that we certainly should tackle it and take it forward. If you're ready for a motion, I'll do that. If there are any other questions or if there's any other issues that need to be talked about as far as this very, very important section. I mean, I was very glad to hear Mrs. Diepenbrock's, comments. I mean, it's not, especially with an issue such as this that is very difficult, it's very emotional, and it's nice to hear that there are some folks out there, and not everybody's going to be happy, but there are some folks out there that think, instead of just plowing and making some kind of recommendation and moving things forward, and the board really tried. We stressed, I think, just about every meeting. We'd like to see if there is a way in which we can, you know, tweak it. If we can do something that reduces the footprint so that it saves property, so that we save homes. And with all the issues that surround, you know, home ownership and everything, it's a very emotional issue, and it's emotional for us too. And you know, not to speak how emotional it is for you folks out there, but you know, we just try to do the best that we can. And we've got 50,000 people that we have to be concerned with, and we have to make the best possible decision that we can that affects the least number of people. And I think we have really, really tried to do that. So anyway, those are the comments that I would have. And if you're ready for a motion, I'll take a crack at it.
Okay, let's have
You know,
a motion.
an easy way to do it would be to move the revised staff recommendation.
Okay,
Dave has it
that'll
written down.
work for me. That will work for me. Yeah, I would move that we move on the revised staff recommendation. It talks about scenario 7. It talks about a cutoff wall, and it talks about a reduced berm. And I think it's important to put those things into the motion so that everybody's comfort level is raised as high as we can possibly raise it without getting into too much detail.
It's been moved that we,
I'll second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Good recommendation, by the way. I noticed that I made an error on the approval of the August the 9th, or not the August 9th, but the agenda approval for the day. I'd like to postpone item number 7. I hope it doesn't generate too much of a problem for the staff. But, questions involved.
When would you like staff to return this item to the board?
Next month.
We can do that.
So we're down to item number 6, the approval of a consideration for delegation of authority to enter into professional services contract with HDR Engineering.
Thank you very much, Chairman Denton, members of the board. This last June, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board adopted the 2012 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. This is a comprehensive planning process that was kicked off by SB 5, which required a number of things happened, but not the least of which was the first comprehensive capital improvement plan for flood protection in the Central Valley, including both the Sacramento River and San Joaquin basins. This was a multi-year effort. DWR did the best it possibly could to deliver a plan to the Central Valley Flood Protection Board in the time frame stipulated by the legislation. Along the way, however, DWR was not able to accomplish the entire mandate due to time constraints. Very importantly, the present plan is missing the details of the inventory of flood protection projects and ancillary activities that would be needed to achieve the flood protection mandates of SB 5. And specifically, those are to provide urban areas and urbanizing areas with 200-year level of protection and 100-year level of protection for small communities and rural areas. As it stands, the 2012 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan is a general strategy for investment it provides a framework within which the state will make decisions about which projects will receive state money and which ones won't. But beyond that, again, the details are missing. The next step in implementing that plan before the 2017 mandated update of the plan is to begin what DWR has called regional flood management plans. DWR has broken up the Central Valley into 9 regional sub-basins or planning areas, each of which will be the planning area for regional flood management planning. West Sacramento is within the regional area called Lower Sacramento River. These boundaries are somewhat problematic. Again, I think DWR did the best they could to draw geographical areas that made sense to them, both from a hydraulic and flood protection standpoint, but also from a political standpoint. Again, they did the best they could, but in a not unusual way, it's really up for the locals to sort of figure out how to actually make things work. And unfortunately, for our region, the Yolo bypass, which is one of the fundamental, perhaps the centerpiece of the entire system in the Sacramento Basin, was split into 3 separate regions, 3 separate planning regions, which would have entailed, well, anything. I think probably the shorthand way of saying it would be death by meetings for all the unfortunate entities that would have had to try to do the regional planning and be coordinated across all their boundaries. So WSAFCA and the city have been engaged in very close coordination with the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency, Sacramento County, Yolo County, Solano County, and the RDs within our area to grapple with redefining that planning area boundary. And you have a map in the staff report that unfortunately doesn't read very well. But the objective is to come up with a reasonable and workable geographic planning area, and the trend line we're on right now is to create a regional flood management plan area that includes the entire Yolo bypass, from the Knights Landing Ridge Cut all the way down to Isleton area. And we're in continuing conversations with Sacramento County to determine whether the agencies south of the river in the Delta North region would like to collaborate with the revised Lower Sacramento region in the regional planning process. That ball hasn't dropped yet, but it's a continuing effort. Another component of implementing the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan's regional planning exercise is that DWR, while they recognize they don't have the capacity to advance the details of project definition and priority setting at a local level, they're willing to finance that exercise. They've allocated a certain amount of money to provide directed funding grants to support the regional planning, but they only want to give those grants to one entity in each region. WSAFCA perhaps didn't jump back from the line fast enough, but our colleagues in the region have asked WSAFCA to be the lead agency, to be the fiscal agent, working with DWR to accept grant funds and to disperse them to the participants in the regional planning effort. The item you have before you is a request for authorization, for the board to delegate authorization to Mr. Ruzich, the general manager, to enter into a contract to obtain professional services to prepare and advance the directed funding grant application with DWR. This is something that we need to be in position to submit early in October, or certainly no later than mid-October. The ink hasn't even dried yet on DWR's guidelines for preparing the grant applications. In fact, we haven't seen the final guidelines yet. But once those are issued, the door is open for the regional entities to submit applications for grant funding, and we want to make sure that we're as close to the front of the line as we can get. Due to the monthly schedule of the board's meeting, we realized that we'd have to be on the ground working with contract support services off of your schedule. So we're hoping and do request that the board feels comfortable authorizing Mr. Ruzich to enter into a moderate contract of up to essentially less than $50,000 to advance those services inside of the grant application timeframe. Once a grant is obtained, and we are confident we will get one, costs associated with planning, again, are reimbursable by the state at evidently a 100% level. So essentially, we need to get in the game, and that is the resource that we're requesting at this time. Are there any questions?
I have a comment, and that is that we definitely want to be the lead agency. That puts us number one in line for the grant.
Yes, sir. Oh, let me, thank you very much. There is one other item of particular note. DWR will not reimburse us for the costs that we incur in advance of the grant being awarded. That's, again, that's just the way things are. But our primary fiscal partner, the Sacramento Area Flood Control Agency, has agreed to share 50-50 the costs, these advanced costs to getting into to get a grant. So while we are asking you for authority at up to $50,000, whatever the net cost of that contract, the professional services contract is, SAFCA will share those 50-50 with us. So we believe that, well, we're confident the net exposure to the board and the community is no more than $25,000.
The DWR contract, they must be operating under a contract for this operation.
I'm not sure I'm following you, sir.
Well, if they're spending money, and as you said, they're not going to reimburse us, for the money that they've got.
Bill, what they're doing is accepting grant applications.
Okay.
So there is a fund they've designated, and they will accept applications for a grant to reimburse the cost of the study.
Okay. All right.
That's the thrust of this effort, is to obtain a grant from DWR to fund the regional flood protection planning effort.
Sure. Okay. Is there any comments? Comments, and make a motion that we accept item number 6 on the agenda.
I'll second it.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. All the opposed, the ayes have it.
Thank you.
We are going to skip item number 7, and we're down to item number 8. Bill has some information for the general public that they may be interested in.
Let me change my glasses here so I can see. Chairman Denton, members of the board. My name is Bill Panos. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of West Sacramento, and one of the responsibilities for the Public Works Department is flood control. So I wanted to give you an update on a couple of things. One is an update on the reorganization of our flood control efforts and our efforts to support the board, the WSAFCA board, in light of recent departure of our previous flood program manager, Mike Bissett. As you know, our program has had great success because of the staff, the great staff we have, the leadership from the WSAFCA board, our city council, in support of the community. And so to further that progress and not interrupt our aggressive approach to flood risk, we had some choices to make very, very quickly and move forward, and we were very sort of thoughtful. It wasn't just expeditious, it was very thoughtful. We worked for about a month on it as we saw that Mike was going to depart, and made some recent decisions that I wanted to go over very, very quickly. First is, I also wanted to explain that Mike Bissett had 2 primary responsibilities here at the city. One was the city engineering, oversight of city engineering, and then flood control as well. Very quickly, I'll run down some of these changes. Greg Fabian, who's in the audience, will be taking over the city engineering. Dave Schbach, as you know, will work for Greg and be responsible as the flood control manager. Toby Wong will be filling in as our flood control engineer, and be moved from where he is now in engineering to be assigned to flood control. I'll take on a more active role in the program. The consultants are going to be taking on a more active role, and several of our staff will be doing the same. This should assure that we have a smooth transition and that we don't have interrupted progress. We have great progress so far in the last few years, and so we don't want to interrupt that. And we have great faith in our staff, and we're very confident in our staff. This gives them an opportunity to do more, to be promoted, to develop their careers, and it's well deserved by all of them. And so that's the choice we've made, rather than go outside and hire folks from the outside to come in. So I wanted to give you that update and maybe answer any questions that you may have about that. Okay, let me move on to a second thing, which is a recent news. As you know, we have a long-standing partnership with the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the California Department of Water Resources and the WSAFCA board to fund needed flood control improvements. These are complicated relationships, and they involve not just our engineering, as you hear about from the staff a great deal, but it also involves policy and financing. One of the traditional, for the last 40 years, one of the things that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has done has allowed us to get credit for projects that we wanted to go out and aggressively pursue. In other words, we couldn't wait for the federal government, the 8 years or the 10 years that it would take for them to get to all of the pre-construction work for our projects. So they have allowed, in policy and in law, us to go ahead and proceed with that, so that the local government, the state government, can get credit later on as the federal government catches up. It's been described to this board before, I think, in several different meetings. So that has traditionally, as I said, for the last 40 years, occurred in a particular way. In 2011, the Assistant Secretary of the Army changed that policy and did not allow crediting. We won't get into the details today, but did not allow crediting for certain things that were previously creditable. It had an effect on all of the projects, all the flood control projects throughout the United States, which were aggressively pursuing public safety and flood control, and certainly had an effect on ours. Since then, we've worked with our consultants and our lobbyists and our delegation. They've been great, our delegation, to work with the Assistant Secretary of the Army at understanding the impacts of that change in policy to these aggressive flood control projects. We have made some progress there to try and make the Assistant Secretary aware of the effects. We are continuing that today, and we recently had applied for a waiver for that change in policy to allow us to get credit for some of the projects that we have previously completed in the rivers area, the two EIPs, we call them, early implementation projects. That request was recently denied, and we are going to pursue. We have a response letter that'll probably come from the mayor, and I'll make sure that the board gets a copy of that. That'll go back to the Assistant Secretary of the Army, explaining the conditions and how she should reconsider that denial. And we are also talking with our delegation, and they'll have meetings with the Assistant Secretary of the Army. And we're also pursuing actual congressional legislation to change the law to allow for communities like ours, communities that are committed to aggressively pursuing flood protection and not having to wait for the federal government to catch up to us, to be able to allow us to continue in our aggressive approach to flood protection. So that's new information. It just happened a couple of days ago. I wanted to make you aware of that. It has not dissuaded us. You know, we're very persistent. We're very polite, but we're also very persistent in our work with Congress and our work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. So we will continue to keep you updated as this moves along. It does have significant, if we are not able to get a waiver or in some way change the Assistant Secretary's policy, it will have significant impacts to the financial ability, our financial ability to not only complete all of the work in a timely way that we feel is a timely way, but it has a significant effect, and we're evaluating those effects now, not just on our overall funding as we go forward, but our ability to fund cash flow, the things that we have planned over the next year or 2 years, those kinds of things. And so we have a very good team. They're being very conservative about this. Some of the models that we've been running have tried to anticipate this and to see, but it's going to be tight. There's going to be an effect, and we're going to come back and talk with you about what that effect is if we're not able to get this waiver approved. So I wanted to leave you with that happy note. Sorry about that, but I wanted to give you an update as it became available. So
thank you, Bill.
I'll take any questions that you have.
Thank you.
I do have one. Bill, when do we anticipate the GRR to be completed?
Give me a date.
In 2014, on the current, it's not even a schedule, but the current concept is to complete by end of 2014.
Okay, so therefore, if it is completed by the end of 2014, shouldn't that trigger the Army Corps of Engineers to reimburse funding?
In the GRR, there's a number of different phases. Without getting into too much detail, I mean, it gets very complicated, but there are various phases of the GRR. In the previous policy, which we had been working from and other communities around the United States had been working from, the allowance of that crediting, the funding, was very early in the process. We pretty much were there. And the change in policy takes that point in time where they're allowing crediting and moves it past the GRR to the chief's report. So not only would we have to would federal crediting or federal funding not be available during the GRR, it wouldn't be available until sometime during the chief's report. We're asking the Assistant Secretary of the Army not only for a waiver for that for our projects, because we're right in the pipeline now. These aren't projects that are going to start. These are projects that are in place and have been working. But we're also asking her to look at changing that line and moving it back up the process so that communities like ours can be assured that we have federal, that can at least be assured that we can apply for federal crediting as those projects move forward. But she's taken away, in some respects, that early ability for us to even apply for federal credit. And remember, these are projects these are not being run or operated or decided upon without the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They're in every meeting. They're at every decision. We do all of the things they tell us to do to make sure these projects are run well. So the idea of separating out the financing from all the other work we're doing with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is problematic for us, because it's not only problematic because all of the communities around the United States, especially in California, have been doing it this way for 40 years, including the Corps, by the way. But it creates an unknown future condition that we're trying to figure out now. We're trying to model, and so we can come back to you and say, okay, if we had federal crediting, this is what the cash looks like, or the cash flow. If we don't have federal crediting at this point in time, this is what it looks like. Now, this doesn't mean that federal crediting is not available. It's just not available in pre-construction the way we would like it. It certainly would be available in construction and post-construction, but these pre-construction costs are not insignificant. They can be 10, 15% of the total costs on a $480 million project. You can do the math. So these are not insignificant costs, and there's certainly things that we can't afford as a small community. WSAFCA, as strong as it is, could not shoulder that entire financial burden. And that's why we have partners, state and federal partners, and they have an interest. They have an interest in protecting these projects. Many of these levies are federal levies, and so we are simply doing the thing on the federal levy that the federal government would like us to do, and we're doing it in an aggressive way. So we're being as responsible as we can. It's a good question.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all of it, isn't it?
Chairman Denton, would you like me to provide a summary of the present flood protection progress report?
Yes, please.
It's my privilege to follow in the heels of Mr. Panos, as always, and I appreciate it. It sets us up very well for success. There are a few other items that I'd just like to touch on briefly in the board's progress report package, and again to offer an opportunity if the board had any questions about the material. Mark covered the 12-13 flood assessment topic at the top of the story. Other news on the 2011 EIP at the rivers. The Rivers Riparian Restoration Project has started. That early work consists of grubbing, essentially removal of invasive understory and trees For those who are watching the site, you've seen about 4 trees come down, and that may seem to be ironic in a project whose objective is to plant a bunch of trees. But what's happening is that this project is enhancing and creating new riparian habitat with native species. And so before those plantings are done, we had to remove a bunch of invasives, including 3 mulberries and an Osage orange. So part of the job is to clean up the stock so that it's contributing to the habitat values that the regulatory agencies want us to deliver. At the CHP Academy site, you may recall that the relocation of the pole line at the toe of the levee required that PG&E trim a bunch of trees in the CHP's decorative landscaping along that north boundary. So we will start a replacement project, kind of an offset, if you will, later on this month to try to make that landscaping whole when it grows in. On the 2013 EIP project, the Sacramento River Southport project, we heard a bunch about that earlier today. I just wanted to note that excuse me, work is continuing on the second administrative draft of the environmental impact study that is being managed jointly by WSAFCA and the Army Corps of Engineers. We're working on a trajectory to submit that second draft to the Army Corps of Engineers for their review in October. The crucial part of this environmental documentation process is it advances our ability to begin the very lengthy and complex transactions associated with real estate and right-of-way. Next month, we will bring to the board a request for a contract to provide real estate support services, and so that item has been deferred. We'll see you in October on that topic. I just wanted to mention, just to reiterate, in addition to the board's action today regarding segment B, just to remind the board that we will be continuing a series of conversations with the property owners related to local site access, and that's, again, it's a very important component of the 65% and subsequent design work. We want to make sure that ball doesn't get dropped, that we continue to advance it so that people have a sense of where we're headed, and that we're in a position to advance that work and design in a timely way. On the general reevaluation report that both bills mentioned earlier, work continues in trying to figure out how to implement the new planning paradigm that Corps headquarters has directed. We are eager to engage in that work, particularly with the prospect that it could complete the GRR on an accelerated schedule by the end of 2014, and along the way achieve milestones that would be advantageous for the city's efforts to obtain crediting qualification for federal funds. The next step along those lines is to investigate in-kind services that WSAFCA, in partnership with the state, can provide to the Corps to supplement the Corps' internal capacity. As an organization, what we're encountering is that their planning resources are oversubscribed. They've got too many projects, and their people are spread too thin, and one of the major outcomes of that is that they can't move as quickly as they'd like to. So part of our partnership has been to investigate ways that we can build their capacity. We can bring additional resources to bear, and we're in the midst at this point of investigating ways to accelerate the delivery of their environmental document and their integrated planning and environmental document. I'll be coming back to the board with an update on that as details evolve. As you know, Ken Ruzich has been working diligently with the Corps of Engineers to bring the South Cross levee into the Corps' maintenance family under PL 8499. That effort is ongoing. And it has The effort is evolved into two general categories. A category having to do with physical improvements, the removal of encroachments, both utility and vegetative encroachments, and the restoration of the crown physically. And that work is being led up by RD 900.
You might want to expound on that cross levy as to why we're doing this.
Okay, absolutely. The South Cross Levee is it's a privately owned feature at the southern boundary of the city of West Sacramento, and it is coterminous with the southern boundary of RD 900. Because it is not a federal project levy, when the federal government and even the state government think about funding and designing flood protection for the city of West Sacramento, they don't see the levee. They don't see that the South Cross levee exists, and so their thought processes essentially are oriented around the Sacramento River levee and the Yolo bypass levee. That's a problem for us because it adds tens of miles of levee and levee improvements and extensive analytics and planning costs, and they're frankly inefficient. So the objective of bringing the South Cross levee into the federal program, there are multiple objectives, but one of the main objectives from a planning standpoint is that we can get the Corps of Engineers and the state to actually see that the levee exists and to make more efficient the investments related to system planning for the city and for WSAFCA and for RD 900. Did I get that?
Actually, what it is, boiled around real plain, is that West Sacramento would be liable for some of the flooding as far as Clarksburg. And if we don't get the cross levee in there and get it approved by the Army Corps of Engineers, if the reclamation districts below us did not maintain their levees, which they don't have the dollars to do, and it flooded and it came back up this way, we would be liable to participate in that pool of money that would go to repair that. And we're trying to get out of that position. We want to stop at our boundary and let the Army Corps of Engineers and State of California pay for that area down there without bringing us into it. We could save a lot of money.
Absolutely. Thank you for amplifying. The other component, though, in that exercise of certifying the levee has to do with professional services. The Corps of Engineers will require documentation from an engineer of the levee work, and there's of course a regulatory permit process that will be required by Fish and Wildlife and Fish and Game related to the relocation or removal of 4 elderberry bushes. We'll be bringing to the board a request for a WSAFCA budget authorization and contract approvals to provide those professional services. Our target is October, but certainly no later than November this year. So we'll be bringing that topic back to you. In the category of public relations, we continue to be supported very ably and excellently by Crocker and Crocker. The latest news is that a second video of the successful work in the 2011 EIPs has been completed. These are informative as well as attractive and entertaining bits of work, and should be posted to the city website soon. And perhaps the nicest thing about the second video is it's a very nice recognition of my predecessor Michael Bassett's work in leading the program through those projects. Another effort that in the public relations realm has been the preparation of a poster presenting the EIP successes of WSAFCA, and that poster will be presented to the Yolo County Water Resources Association board this coming Monday afternoon. The Water Resources Association funds a number of water-related investigations and planning and implementation efforts. WSAFCA's efforts in flood protection represent the most complicated and most expensive and, perhaps most importantly, expensive implementation related to water resources, for which the Water Resources Association has not paid a dime. But they're very happy to acknowledge our successes, and we enjoy that positive attention. Under floodplain administration, just wanted to touch on an item related to the Liberty project, which is a pending subdivision on the Pack property. This is property that's located between Linden and Davis Roads, immediately west of the Bees Lakes area. We've had quite a bit of engagement with that property owner and the property owner's consulting representatives. They provided us very useful information related to real estate and property, and they have also been interacting with the technical staff on their ideas and their preferences for levee design and alignment of the village parkway. We expect to have another round of comments from those interests, and we'll be working to turn around a response within the next couple weeks. It's been a very productive collaboration, I have to add. We've talked a bit about the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan and the regional flood management plans, and unless there are any questions, I probably just keep on jumping down the list. Another initiative of the state has been a planning process called Integrated Regional Water Management Plans. This is a planning effort that attempts to capture all things water related: flood control, water supply, water quality, habitat, both aquatic and terrestrial. It's been, over the last number of years, a huge undertaking. From WSAFCA's perspective, it's been something that we've needed to monitor, needed to be engaged in, but as a planning effort, it has yet to yield substantial fruit. Nevertheless, the state is increasingly looking to the IRWMP process as a way of characterizing some level of qualification for state investment. And so specifically, we see the possible future where, in order to pursue state funding for flood protection projects, our project would have to be integrated in the integrated regional water management planning process. So along those lines, staff continues to monitor the latest version of integrated regional water management planning, which is now called the West Side. That's an initiative by DWR that includes our planning area. Really nothing new to add about FEMA remapping. The city's general plan update is continuing, and flood protection program staff continue to interact with that update process. And really there are no other changes in other items in the progress report. And so if there are any questions, I'd be pleased to attempt an answer.
Nope.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. There be anything else on the agenda? If not, we will proceed to adjourn. Meeting's adjourned.